My wife cheated on me with her boss, then stole $250, $0 from our joint account to cover it up. Now she's suing me for half our house and claiming I always knew about her affair. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how my wife, Jessica, betrayed me in the worst way possible. It all started with little things, missed calls, late nights, and her suddenly being more secretive than ever. But the real bombshell hit when I accidentally stumbled on her phone one evening. I was just trying to find her contact info for a dinner reservation, and I saw a message thread that made my stomach drop. It was from her boss, Mark, a guy I always thought was just her work buddy. Turns out he's more than that. The messages were flirty, suggestive, and outright inappropriate. I saw them talking about meeting up after hours, sharing inside jokes that didn't involve work and plans that clearly weren't for business. It was like a punch to the gut. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Jessica always played the "I'm so busy at work" card, but here she was, sneaking around with her boss, possibly for months. I felt numb, then furious. How could she do this? How could she lie so blatantly right in front of me? I knew something was off. For a while she'd been more distant, more irritable, and I caught her deleting texts more than once. But I never imagined it would come to this. I needed to see if there was more, so I started digging. That's when I found the bank statements. She transferred $250, $0 from our joint account. I couldn't believe it at first. That much money to cover what? When I confronted her about it, she just shrugged and said she was investing in a new business venture. Yeah, right. I looked into it. No such venture existed. It was just her way of covering her tracks, I guess. I was stunned. How could she steal that kind of money? And for what? To hide her affair, to buy herself some time, whatever the reason. It was a blow I didn't see coming. I decided I had to confront her directly. That night, I sat her down in the living room, my hands trembling. She looked at me with that fake, innocent smile she always used when she was about to lie her way out of something. I asked her about the messages, about Mark, about the money. Her reaction was nothing short of infuriating. She spun this whole story about how I was paranoid, how I was imagining things, that Mark was just a mentor, and that I was overreacting because I was insecure. She said she loved me, that she'd never cheat, and that I was just jealous. That she was just trying to save her career, and that the money was for something legitimate, something she refused to tell me more about. It was of emotions. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry all at once. How could she lie so convincingly? How could she pretend she was innocent after everything I'd seen? I was sick to my stomach, feeling like I'd been punched in the chest. That night, I couldn't sleep. All I kept thinking about was her betrayal, her lies, and the fact that she'd stolen $250,000, money that I'd worked my ass off for to cover her tracks. I was devastated, and I knew from that moment nothing would be the same. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and everything in my world felt like it was crumbling. Jessica kept insisting she was innocent, that I was misunderstanding her, that Mark was just a work friend, and that I was overreacting because I was insecure. She threw in the classic line about how I was reading too much into things, and that I needed to trust her, after all I'd seen, after the money gone and the messages. It was like she was living in some alternate universe where her lies were truth and my feelings didn't matter. I started digging deeper, trying to find more evidence, trying to get a clearer picture of what was really going on. I hired a private investigator just to see if I was missing anything. Turns out I wasn't wrong. The Pi came back with footage of Jessica and Mark leaving a hotel downtown more than once. They'd been meeting up late at night, sneaking around in a way that made it clear they knew exactly how wrong it was. The Pi also found out that Jessica had been funneling money into some secret accounts I didn't even know existed. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how deep her lies went. At this point, I felt like I was living in some kind of nightmare. Jessica kept denying everything, calling me paranoid, crazy, and accusatory. She'd throw tantrums, call me controlling, and accuse me of ruining her reputation. She claimed she was just trying to protect her job, even though her boss Mark was clearly more than just a mentor. I could see her trying to manipulate the situation to make me doubt myself. But I wasn't going to buy it anymore. I'd seen enough. One night, I decided I had to confront her again, face to face. I told her I knew about the affair, the money, everything. Her reaction was a mixture of anger and denial. She said I was a jealous, insecure asshole, that she'd never cheat on me, and that I was just trying to ruin her career and reputation. She called me a paranoid psycho and accused me of spying on her because I didn't trust her. That was the moment I realized her lies had become so thick, so ingrained, that she truly believed her own bullshit. She refused to admit anything, even when I presented her with the evidence I'd gathered. The emotional toll was brutal. I felt betrayed to my core, humiliated that I'd been so blind for so long. I'd always thought we had a good marriage, but now I saw how fragile it was, how much she'd been hiding. I couldn't stop thinking about the money she'd stolen, about the lies, about the nights she spent with Mark. I was angry, so angry I could barely see straight. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I knew I couldn't stay with her, not after everything. The trust was shattered and I couldn't see a way back. I started planning my next move, knowing that whatever happened next, my life was about to change forever. After the initial shock wore off, I knew I had to decide what I was going to do. Jessica kept insisting she was innocent, but every piece of evidence pointed to her lying through her teeth. I couldn't keep living in this fog of deception. I had to take control, even if it meant burning everything down first. I started looking into my legal options: divorce, custody of the house, how to deal with the money she'd stolen. Honestly, I felt like I was in some kind of nightmare. I'd built a life, a future with her, and now it was all unraveling. The betrayal cut so deep I questioned everything: my judgment, my trust, my self-worth. One thing I couldn't get out of my head was the money. That $250, $0, what she did with it, how she covered her tracks, and what it meant for our future. I knew I had to get to the bottom of it. I hired a forensic accountant to trace every transfer, every withdrawal, every suspicious transaction. What I found was staggering. She'd been funneling money into accounts under fake names, and it was clear she'd been planning this for months. She'd even opened a new credit card in my name, maxed out with luxury items and trips. I felt so violated, like she'd been living this double life, lying to me every step of the way. Meanwhile, Jessica was still trying to spin her stories. She told me she was saving for a rainy day, that the money was for our future, and that I was just too suspicious. She claimed she loved me, but I could see the contempt in her eyes whenever she looked at me. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. She'd been cheating, stealing, and lying while I was working my ass off to support us. I felt like I was drowning in her lies, and the more I uncovered, the more my anger grew. I started thinking about revenge, not just emotionally but financially too. She needed to pay for what she'd done. I decided I was done playing nice. I wanted her out, and I wanted her to face the consequences. I started gathering everything I'd need for a divorce: proof of her infidelity, the evidence of her theft, bank statements, texts, emails. I even hired a private investigator to keep tabs on her whereabouts. It was all about making sure I had the upper hand. When I confronted her with everything, she flipped out, calling me a crazy control freak, saying I was trying to ruin her life. But I wasn't backing down. I told her she was going to lose everything: her job, her money, her reputation, and she could either come clean now or face the consequences later. That night I sat her down and told her I was filing for divorce. Her face twisted with rage and desperation. She started crying, begging me to stay, saying she'd do anything to fix this. But I knew better. I'd been through enough. I told her that if she didn't come clean about everything, I'd go to the authorities and she'd be facing serious charges. The look in her eyes was pure panic. I realized then that she knew she'd screwed up big time, and she was trying to save whatever she could. I felt a strange mix of relief and disgust. I was finally taking control, but I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. I'd been betrayed in every way possible, and now I had to rebuild from the ashes. The day I filed for divorce was one of the hardest days of my life, but also one of the most necessary. I sat across from the lawyer, going over every piece of evidence I had. Gathered texts, bank statements, the PI's reports. I made sure everything was airtight. Jessica refused to come to the meeting. She was too busy fighting for her reputation, she said. But I knew I had enough to prove her infidelity and theft. When I handed over the documents, I saw the realization in her eyes. She knew she'd gone too far. Jessica's reaction was classic. She started throwing tantrums, claiming I was trying to destroy her, that I was jealous and paranoid, and that I was ruining her life for no reason. She even accused me of knowing about her affair all along, claiming I'd turned a blind eye because I was afraid of losing my precious house and money. She said I was just a jealous husband who couldn't handle her success. That part made me laugh bitterly. She had no idea what I knew, what I'd uncovered. She thought she could spin her way out of this, but I was done playing her game. The financial side of things was complicated. Her theft had left us in a mess. She drained accounts, maxed out credit cards, and hidden assets. I contacted my bank and the authorities to report her theft. They started an investigation into the missing $250. Meanwhile, I moved to freeze her accounts, knowing she'd try to hide more money or assets. I also started the divorce process officially. It was time to cut ties once and for all. I realized that I'd been living in her shadow, trying to keep everything together, but her lies had shattered everything. I felt betrayed, angry, and exhausted, but I also felt a strange sense of relief. Finally, I was taking control. Jessica's lawyer tried to argue that I was trying to manipulate her, but the evidence was clear. She lied, cheated, and stolen from me. The judge listened patiently as I laid out everything: proof of her affair, the stolen money, the secret accounts. Jessica's face was flushed with rage and shame. She kept insisting she was innocent, that I was trying to ruin her, but her words rang hollow. I knew I couldn't trust her anymore. The judge eventually granted the divorce, and I felt a strange wave of relief wash over me. It was the end of a nightmare I never thought I'd wake up from. In the weeks that followed, I worked with the authorities to recover some of the stolen money. It wasn't all back, but enough to make me feel like I was fighting for what was rightfully mine. I also started the process of selling the house, something I hadn't wanted to do, but it was the only way to move forward. Jessica's name was removed from the title, and I took steps to rebuild my life. I moved into a new place, started focusing on myself, and tried to forget the woman I thought I knew. But the scars remained. Trust once broken is hard to repair. Still, I knew I'd come out stronger. I learned the hard way that sometimes you have to lose everything to find your way back, and I'm still figuring out what that looks like. After everything finally settled, I realized how much I'd been by Jessica's lies and betrayal. The house was gone, the money was partially recovered, and I was left to pick up the pieces. I won't lie, it hurt. A lot. But somewhere inside, I felt a strange sense of clarity. I'd been living in her shadow, believing in her lies, trying to hold onto what was never truly mine anymore. Now I was finally free from that weight. The first few weeks after the divorce were the hardest. I'd wake up in the morning expecting her to be there, and then it hit me: she was. I'd catch myself reaching for the phone to call her, only to remember she was gone. I'd look at the empty space where the house once stood and realize I'd lost more than just a marriage. I'd lost my sense of stability. But as the days went on, I started to rebuild. I threw myself into work, into friends, into anything that kept my mind off her. I also began seeing a therapist, which helped me process everything. I had to confront the anger, the betrayal, the sadness. It was raw but necessary. One thing I learned is that money isn't everything, and trust is everything else. Jessica's greed and lies cost her everything, and I saw firsthand how fragile a marriage can be when built on deception. I also learned that revenge isn't always about getting even. Sometimes it's about reclaiming your dignity and moving on. I'd been through hell, but I refused to let her steal my happiness completely. I started focusing on myself, my health, my future, my peace of mind. I even bought a new car, something I'd always wanted but never felt justified doing before. It was small, but it symbolized a new beginning. Looking back, I realize how much I've grown from this nightmare. I've learned to trust my instincts, to listen to that little voice that says something's wrong. I've learned that even the most charming, successful people can hide dark secrets. And most importantly, I've learned that I'm stronger than I thought. I don't need her approval or her lies to feel whole. I'm still healing, still figuring out what life looks like without her, but I know I'll be okay. Sometimes betrayal opens the door to a new beginning, one where I get to rebuild on my own terms. And honestly, that's a lesson I'll carry with me forever. Now, looking back, I realize how much I've been through and how it's changed me. Jessica's betrayal was a blow I didn't see coming, and it left scars I'll carry for a long time. But in a strange way, it also forced me to confront parts of myself I hadn't really faced before. I learned that I'm more resilient than I thought, that I can survive the worst and still come out stronger. I've come to understand that trust is fragile, and it's something you have to earn every day. Once it's broken, rebuilding takes time, effort, and a lot of patience, things I'm still working on. The biggest lesson I've taken away is that no matter how perfect someone seems, you can't ignore the signs if something feels off. I was for a long time thinking I knew my wife, thinking she'd never do something so destructive. But people are complex, and sometimes they hide their true selves behind a facade. I wish I'd seen the warning signs earlier, but I also know I can't dwell on what I missed. Instead, I focus on what I've gained: clarity, strength, and a renewed sense of self. As I move forward, I'm committed to rebuilding my life on my terms. The trust I once gave so freely is now something I guard carefully. I've learned to listen to my instincts, to stand up for myself, and most importantly, to never ignore my gut feelings again. I've also realized that I don't need someone who lies, steals, and manipulates to be happy. I can find happiness on my own or with someone who respects and values me for who I am. In the end, I want anyone reading this to know that betrayal isn't the end of your story. It's a painful chapter, but not the final page. You can survive, you can rebuild, and sometimes you can even find a better version of yourself in the process. It's not easy and it hurts like hell, but life has a way of moving forward. And so will I.